we are back after just a little bit of a delay. We have Team Raindrop and Friends hosting this room, and we have the German part of Disastra being the guest.
Yep, familiar names such as Essia, Imari, and Cheapy. Probably my favorites if I was to bet on any team. Just because, I mean, we just have the two most recent European champions, and also the second place Mr. Essia himself, and he's been on every single finals that I remember of. So, I mean, they have a lot of credits to their name.
In the last team tournament, Disastra Germany, I believe, ended up winning, right?
I think they lost to CPV, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a very, very hard clash, and I honestly don't remember which one won, but I knew both played really, really well.
It was a very interesting and very long set, and I expect that to come from the rest of the matches we're going to be watching today.
And they have the same lineup as their counterpart, their American counterpart. The teams are cool. They have the Agroforest, the Summit Haven, and the Portal Puppet. So they have the same lineup, so expect the same quality of play as well as the same decks. As for Raindrops, they introduce a new archetype in the Chimera. We saw it the last series too. So I guess it's a new mix. Let's see if Team Disastra will be able to come. The European side will be able to overcome that. They also have Tenko Haven. The first time we're going to see it today, or rather tonight. And what do you think? What do you feel about this matchup? This is Summit Haven versus Tenko Haven.
I think in the matchup between the two, is the Summit Haven also playing Tenkos as a splash? I know some of them do. This one is not.
This is a full committed Aether style of Summit Haven.
So
their win con is Garuda. They have two Garudas, and they have the usual, I guess, suspects. The Aether, the Heavenly Knights, one De La Fil. They're splashing one De La Fil. I guess the healing for followers is very strong. And they have the Heinz, the Jeans, the Carapaces, Snow Whites, and they have two Father Punishments. So they probably feel comfortable in this matchup.
Yeah, the Tenko list is also playing Heavenly Knights too, and Godsworn Alexiel, so that might be very important for this matchup. But like you said, Father Punishment is also very swingy in this matchup.
I would have to favor the Summit style of deck, because not only are their followers extremely healthy, makes Tenko kind of like just poking or scratching, but also the fact that they have Father Punishment will make their tempo plays already even stronger.
Yeah, they have Father Punishment, and they're going on the draw, so they do have that extra Evo to back it up. They just have to draw them now.
Both decks you obviously want to get their Moriais, they want to set up their globes, they want to start drawing their cards, because expect this game to go a bit slow until turn 5, which is where, well, their key cards will be played.
So you have the option to Black Inscripture this. I guess they're just immediately doing that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of strong targets. Also, no Snow White played. Usually you want to start with Snow Whites instead of because on turn 3 you can always play the Bejeweled Priestess. So this, if I was playing, I would try to read the fact that there's no. Fun fact: Team Germany chose to play really fast. Something we're not used to see from all the players. Actually, all the three of them are methodical and take some time to think of their plays.
Yeah, a snap Black Inscripture is not something I would expect from Mr. Sheepy himself.
I guess when they combine, they become this Megatron, right? This Tron. Maybe they're the most powerful force in the universe.
The all-knowing team, they had calculated that was the best play within 0.001 seconds.
I bet, actually, I played with Cheapy once, and I bet on the mulligan they have decided to play that on turn 2.
So, this is a very long decision. I suppose the decision is between playing either Jean, passing, playing the white. You have a lot of options, because you can just not expose your 2/2 here if you don't want to.
Having seen the Black Inscripture to answer the 1/2 gives you one of two reads. Either you don't have any 2-drop, or you're very heavy. So I guess they're balancing that. Obviously, you don't want to expose your Lorena, but since you went first, you don't have that many evil points. I think it's a safe play to just go for the Lorena.
Yeah, I also like playing the Lorena. And this is going to be a pretty reasonable black in scripture. Hopefully something to draw along with it. And that's a Globe of the Starway is exactly what they were looking for.
This will pop at turn 7. So it's a good turn for you to get that board space. It's usually where you want to go for the Summit Temple to set up that Heavenly Knight next turn, or even go White Fangs. It's a good turn to go for Glow.
You have an interesting decision to make here now. Do you want to set up this White Fang Temple, or do you want to just play that black in scripture?
I usually like to actually set up White Fangs after I already have a Tenko established, but in this matchup, since you're so starved tempo, you might go for the White Fang now just to get a bit earlier. And since there's no Moriai on the field, it's kind of safe to go at the moment.
Yeah, there's nothing quite yet to counter that 6/6 dragon.
On the other hand, on board, that 2/3 trades so well into the 2/2, and they're going into their Evo turn. They could possibly evolve a Lorena and push a lot of stats to block that Tenko.
They're going into the Evo turn, but look at the hand. They don't have too much to play. They do have this Carapace, and if they decide to Evo, which is a little skeptical to begin with, a little sketchy to start with.
Yeah, you have to expect your opponents to go the Tenko play, and having D-Time and Father Punishments in the deck, I don't think Evolving Phase or even Evolving Trade is a very strong play. It's too susceptible to Tenko, but they still choose to go for it, and the chance that they get that turtle 1 turn earlier might be important.
And this way, you're not just allowing that Tenko Shrine to come down and just free kill your Jean. You're making them have to think a little bit more about that Tenko Shrine.
I would actually not be surprised if they chose to not go for Tenko this turn. That Hind, the White Hind, seems to be a very strong, solid play. The 3/5 is a strong body, and next turn they're gonna have a turtle, which makes your Tenko a bit less impressive, but you can still save your Tenko for turn 7 and combine it with the Black in Scripture, make those beings a lot more worth it. Kind of curious to see what they're going to choose to go for.
Even something like a Serenian Hind Evo might be a little ambitious, and it ends up dying to the tea time anyway, but we might see something like that happen.
Although getting a 5/7 does not help that much against that tea time, so you're right. Does it help against the turtle? I don't think so. It does actually, because the turtle can evolve into a 5/7. So maybe that's a consideration that they're thinking before they play this turn.
What do you think
about
about
evolve the Hind or not?
What do you think about taking a very slow option, playing Black in Scripture, and then just setting up your Snow White?
I think that's certainly the weakest of the 3 plays. I think that going for a Snow White, it's too successful. As I mentioned before, you saw your opponents have a very slow turn, so you have to expect some sort of tea time or Hind, and Snow White doesn't fight very well against those 2 big bodies.
So they did end up going for that Tempo Evo, and Tempo Evo is going to get answered pretty nicely by this tea time.
But they played around the information that they already have on the board, and as I mentioned before, evolving this Hind is very important because otherwise the turtle would just be able to, together with a Black in Scripture or something else, to kill that 5/7, and it would only be a 4 health follower. Sorry, if they didn't evolve, they only had to evolve the turtle, and it would be a 5/4, which is very hard for them to deal with. This way, at least, they have the option of Black in Scripture the turtle if they evolve the turtle.
Now, is this time for the 50-50 on that Tenko Shrine? Do you think the situation is desperate enough that you have to go for that 50-50 here?
I think so, because since you're playing a healing deck, even if you fail the 50-50, you still have the option of going Black in Scripture into Hind and making sure the board is cleared. On the other hand, getting that 5 extra damage might be enough with Summit Heavenly Knight deck, so kind of curious to see. I would risk it a bit, because I'm afraid that these Tenkos will lose time to be played, and the later you play them, the more susceptible you are to Father Punishment.
Yeah, if you don't play your Tenkos out, the longer you wait, the harder they get to play for the most part.
It's kind of like the support cannon philosophy, so...
See, and there you go, you got that 50-50, and the immediate emo, you're pretty good. Showing just a little bit of emotion there.
I mean, it takes some cojones to do something like that.
But sometimes you have to look at the board and just think to yourself, this is what I have to do if I'm going to get back into this game. I'm going to stop myself from falling far behind. And this, I think, is a pretty free De La Fill. Just set it up. It's a free ward. Why not?
Curious to see if they will choose to evolve them or not, because at the moment there's no access to Tempest Purge. We're still on turn 7. So we might see this full push on tempo. We might also go for actually something that I would have liked to see would be a Globe Hind, Black Hind, push for as much health and stats on the board as possible. Next turn they would have the Tea-Time popping, which is not optimal, so they might choose to go for that the next turn.
What about Tea-Time and then Globe?
That is also a good option to go for. This Moria is also juicy, so like next turn is going to be really interesting. So
that's what they decide to go for. So they can have a very explosive turn if this board gets cleared in any way. They can have something set up where they go Moria plus Darkhind, and they can pop off anything on the board.
My problem with this is that they're allowing their explosive turn to be on the Themis Purge turn, so I expect Team Disastra to do something different outside of the obvious Dark Hind play. Maybe they will make sure that their threats will be just played one turn at a time. So I'm interested to see how it goes.
There are only 2 Themis Purge in the deck, so maybe they're not that afraid of the Purge.
Sins be purged. They definitely wanted to see that Father Punishment, but it's not going to be an option.
Well, they could still hold on to that Evolve for a couple more turns, and I imagine they might feel like they kind of have to, because they might want to get rid of these Tenkos over the course of the next couple turns. If you let Tenko have the time that they need, they're going to end up removing everything.
This is an awkward turn. You obviously want to deal with this board, but there's no clean way to do so.
Not without spending your last Evolve.
I actually do not like this play. Your opponent is so board filled, right, that I would actually like to see them establishing the second Tenko, which wouldn't kill anybody on the board, but it would be set up a very strong next turn.
This sets up a pretty good. If you want to go for a 50-50, you can go Moria plus Darkhind. But that's a pretty spooky 50-50 to have to take.
Is that spooky? Because they also have the option of evolving the Darkhind, finishing up that trade, making it a 5-1 though. So, but again, I would have liked to see the second Tenko really like that. I think you can take 7 damage since you're healing a lot anyways next turn. But they obviously chose to be very defensive. They've been defensive the last turn as well, so it's nothing to. It's a different line that might actually get him the.
I think they're thinking next turn they can go Tenko and then set up the White Fang Temple. But on this board, I don't know if this is going to be quite enough. It's not the biggest board in the world, but it's a pretty sizable board here.
And unfortunately for them, they have not seen the De La Fill yet, and that might actually be something that they will need eventually, because the heals do tend to run out when you just don't get that De La Fill.
Yeah, right now there's only that White Fang Temple to get those procs in.
And they're out of Evos, which means Lorenas are not effective. The Black Diamonds are extremely slow at this moment of the game.
Now you do have this pretty big dragon. This big dragon can clear off a 4/5, clear off a 3/5, but that doesn't feel too good because there is that Bane there. You can just push face damage with that.
I actually like that Team Disastra chose to not evolve that turn. That trade isn't very good. It gets easily cleaned by Jean or a Blackened Scripture, and that's it. That was your final push, kinda, of the game. You out of Evos, you lost access to Father Punishments, you lost access to Lorenas, you lost access to, the powerful tempo plays that your deck is able to do.
I think Disastra, knowing that they've already drawn 14 cards and haven't found a Father Punishment, they're pretty likely to start drawing a Father Punishment pretty soon. They do have that Moria to cycle another card. And if you don't have that Evo left, that Father Punishment is just dead. So I think they're just recognizing that they're probably going to need that Father Punishment at some point this
And I think this is quite obvious a Delafil into a Blackened Scripture, but I think they're still gonna take their time. They have to keep in mind that the Moriai and the Turtle will be hard to play later on in the game, so they might want to go for Turtle instead, because then again, you don't want to slow down too much and give the opportune moment for your opponent to go Delafil, because that would be just game winning for them, having already 2 Tenkos. So I'm kind of curious to see. They'll definitely take their time.
It's also a little scary to make a very massive board push because your opponent might have been willing to take a couple extra points of damage and hold on to a Themis' Purge if they had had one. So you don't actually know if they don't have a Themis' Purge or not.
Especially because it's 3 damage is very minimal. White Fangs will heal 3 damage, so you don't need to necessarily be scared of it. So I definitely like this Moriai. Definitely establish one of the 2 amulets in my opinion, because they'll be, again, very bricky, very slow. They'll take a lot of slots on your board. And since there's no Delafil, sometimes when you don't see a Delafil on the Tenko deck, you actually can take it slow. Their White Fangs are their threats, and they might actually end up, well, getting out of them, right?
Yeah, and I think setting up the Moriai there is pretty good because that also just gets them a little bit closer to their Father Punishment. And I think at this point, that's what that Evo is. They're just waiting to use that Evo on that.
Yeah, and they perfectly recognize that the amulets are the clunkiest things they have in their hand. They have to get rid of it. The Delafil was only healing the Carinian Hind, which doesn't get it out of Blackened Scripture range or Jean range. So I really like this establishment, the slower cards first, and then the proactive ones. Also, the fact that Father Punishment isn't necessarily good in this situation because there's already 2 Tenkos. So I think they dropped that plan, and what they're thinking now is we're just gonna try to grind them out of healing effects.
Interesting. I thought that was a pretty clean-looking John, but they disagree. This is setting up a nice 3-3, and it's gonna clean up the entire board.
I like this. They recognize that their opponents are running low on cards. Maybe we can just grind them out of resources. We don't have the Delafil, we don't have Summit, so we can't really push for face. So I like this. Establishing a 7-3 is very strong in this situation. I think they saw 2 Black Scriptures already, if I'm not mistaken, so it's a very good time to play a 7-3.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty difficult to remove that. The Heavenly Knight here doesn't line up well at all. This Delafil, it's all right. It'll at least stop the Heavenly Knight from hitting your face.
I expect just because of the mana, they're deciding if we go for Heavenly Knight and Globe or Jewel Priestess and Delafil. Using your Heavenly Knights without Summit in this deck feels very bad. It doesn't feel good to trade your Heavenly Knight into their Heavenly Knight. Obviously, you need those 3 Heavenly Knights to put a clock on the Tenko Waven deck, because otherwise they'll just keep healing so much that you can't finish the game.
Getting a 3rd tea time. Not quite what they're looking for here. They can't even reasonably play it at the moment.
So they chose to go for the Globe. I think that's a smart choice. I actually didn't think about it too much, but the fact that, again, they're the slowest cards, you want to cycle your deck, you want to see the Summit Temple. That's actually the most important card in this matchup for them. So they just keep cycling and try to find that option.
Jewel Priestess has been very clunky for them this matchup. They haven't really had the board space or the time to play it out and to even get the diamond started.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons we see most decks run 2 Jewel Priestesses, even in Tenko decks. It's because after turn 2, she becomes worse. The longer the game goes, she's just 2 board spaces that you don't want to actually fill with such a small body, and an amulet that takes 2 turns to end. And it doesn't have an impactful effect, right? Drawing 2 cards on turn 10, or turn 8, or turn 9 is not as impactful as drawing them on turn 5, which is exactly where you want to have the most amount of options to evolve and so on.
This isn't a bad looking Jean. You could heal up your Heavenly Knight a bit, and it looks like that's exactly what they're going to be doing.
I like this. This is very strong. Also pushes face damage. They need to find a way to finish this game.
Yeah, it's going to push quite a bit of damage. Now let's see how this 50-50 goes. That's a big fist pump for Team Rain.
The second one they miss, actually. I don't expect it to get to their minds, but since it's already late, these players have been playing for a long hours. It might affect them a bit. Hope not. I just want to see very high competitive play. I expect them not to. They're very used to these situations, and these are top of the top players of EU region. So they've been in some games where RNG just was in favor a couple of times.
Now you could Darkhind just to draw some cards. Is that quite enough for what you're trying to do here?
I would expect him to do that, actually. I would not be surprised to see even a Jewel this now, but I think you definitely start to go start withdrawing first, see your options, but I don't think that tea time will be good after it. I think, again, just play the amulets. If you don't see the Summit Temple, I think you go for the white diamond, because otherwise you commit yourself to never play it this game.
Going for the tea time, maybe an evolved trade here.
They choose to use their last Evo, and then they'll probably go for the Black Hind. It's also a good option to... That tea time countdown is so big, you need to start decreasing it.
This evolve can't feel good either, because you do know that there's going to be Father Punishments coming off the top of your deck sooner rather than later at this point.
Wow, that was a fantastic top deck. That is, yet again, the third John, the third board clear. I think you do it.
But if you do play that John... Well, actually, I was going to say that the White Fang Temple will pop and you'll just get the dragon, but that's not the case here.
That is perfect. How does Summit Temple come back from that, right? They don't have access to Temis Purge. If you get the 6/6, they just lost their last Evo. Once Avon goes out of Evos, they're very predictable. If they don't have spells, they're not going to kill your board.
These two teams are playing very similar decks, except one happens to have the Tenko Shrines and the other has Father Punishments to answer the Tenko Shrines. But unfortunately, they didn't draw the Father Punishments to actually answer them.
This is also a cute way to do it, I guess. It's the same result. Works out the same way. And I really like this as board establishment. It's very hard for them to kill that 6/6.
Garuda can sort of present some damage from hand, but really not much at all.
And again, no Summit Temple. It's soul crushing. I believe they're running 3 Summit Temples, which is something that some decks have been cutting, but they realize we definitely need this card. And out of 17 left, not a single Summit Temple. That is crushing for them.
They must be looking at this Aether and thinking, if only we could get a Heavenly Knight, a Heavenly Aegis here.
I unfortunately don't think it would be good enough, perhaps, because they have access to Heavenly Knights as well, and that's 9 damage on board. I guess they have De La Field, but definitely imagine if you had Summit Temple here. Like, you could Summit Temple face, right? That would be a 3-turn clock. You'd have a 7/7, not easy for them to deal with. They probably had to trade their dragon into it, so it's definitely rough.
Going for Black Diamond is pretty interesting here. I guess they're thinking we just need as much damage as we can possibly get here.
Yeah, they are still hoping to get Summit Temple. It's still 14 damage, 16 damage with Black Diamond. They are trying to set up a 2-turn lethal block. They're expecting their opponents not to have a healing because they never played De La Field. Remember what I told you? At this moment, those Tenkos are useless.
Yeah, there's no without the De La Field, there's just no way to proc them. They're just taking up space on the board. Usually,
unless they go for the White Hind, which is a possibility this turn.
You don't usually see Tenko in this position this late into the game, where they can't actually proc their shrines.
I would expect him to go for a suicide on either the Snow White. I would like to see a suicide on the Snow White and the Jean, and then Blackened Scripture Moriai, obviously Moriai first to see the options, and go for the White Hind. That pushes a lot of damage. I believe that pushes 10 damage to face, setting them to full. So it's a very strong.
This also frees up the most board space if that's what you're interested in.
Oh, so they're going for Snow White, possibly. Interesting. Huh, I don't understand this play.
Well, by setting up the Heavenly Knight first, you're just blocking off your opponent from playing their own Heavenly Knight.
Interesting. I guess so. I guess you're opting to go for the storm damage before they establish their own Heavenly Knight. It's also a strong play, obviously.
Usually, I think the player who has the Heavenly Knight on the board in these mirrors are usually favored, because eventually you get into the position where the only answer you actually have to a Heavenly Knight is your own Heavenly Knight.
And that is the case, actually, so heads up. Good play. I guess when your opponents have 16 cards left and they don't have Summit Temple on the board, that probably means they have something like Garuda and Heavenly Knights.
Yeah, you have to imagine your opponent's hand is somewhat clunky. It's pretty impressive that all the Father Punishments and all of the Summit Temples are just at the bottom of the deck.
Also, Prism Swing. Funny enough, that could be a card that they could get a couple of value out of it.
Yeah, start putting... maybe get some Storm Lions over the course of the game. The game will have to go really long for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're at this weird spot where these Heavenly Knights make a very interesting wall. They don't really want to trade into each other because neither player has a Summit Temple.
They could go for Moriai Black Hind and then White Hind. No, that's not enough mana.
Not space.
It's also a 1 out of 3. That Bejeweled Priestess is quite annoying in this situation. Those Tenkos, man, they're clugging a bit. They're bricking a bit. Like, not having Delafil, like, as I mentioned, your healing is finite if you have the leader effect.
Yeah, this dragon doesn't quite do it. You're not able to actually get over the 7/7 here.
I think you still trade the dragon, go for the double hind. I believe that's a strong play, killing the Bejeweled Priestess, or even attacking the tea time if clear. So maybe they'll go for that one.
I was going to ask you, what were your thoughts on potentially trading the Heavenly Knight instead of trading the Hind? That way you get some more procs at the end of the turn.
Interesting, but you mentioned the turn before that they were choosing to go for a protective stance. Having 14 health in this moment means that a Summit Temple Heavenly Knight would be able to finish them off, although they already saw 2 Heavenly Knights. So I see your point. I think they feel quite comfortable riding this Heavenly Knight to victory, so I expect them to keep doing it.
Yeah, they saw last turn there wasn't really an answer to it. Why not just put them in the same position again?
And this is basically a waiting room. One team is waiting for Delafil, the other team is waiting for Summit Temple.
So what does that Aether pull at the moment? Let's find out.
Pulls Hind, I believe.
Hind. That's not quite what you're looking
Oh, actually, Garuda pulls Garuda, the second Garuda.
Yeah, Garuda doesn't quite do it either, just being stats. You need a way to deal with this 3/4.
Yeah, it is a 6/7 though. Not a bad stat line. And at the moment, the Heavenly Knight doesn't have store, so I would not be surprised if they went for it. A 6/7 body is not bad.
Well, 6/7 isn't quite enough if that Heavenly Knight's gonna kill you.
But it doesn't, because they have the Delafil open, right?
Oh,
unless they get some sort of extra damage.
Yeah, they would need some heal off the top of their deck.
I actually think you set up lethal. They're trying to decide if they go trade or the face. I like to go for the Snow White. It's more resilient. You saw the 3rd Black in Scripture. I think they already played the 3, and this is obviously a lethal board state. There we go. Finally, that Ether with the Summit Temple actually keeps them alive. So we still have a game. We still have a game.
This is actually pretty massive now. them deciding to not trade into that John last turn with their Heavenly Knight will now allow, with Aether plus Summit Temple, they can actually trade their John into that Heavenly Knight.
But I respect that decision. I think setting up lethal is something you strive to do. You always expect to do that, to be that most consistent play out of the options you have. But as you mentioned, they didn't see Summit Temple before, so I mean, you didn't expect it, I guess.
You have to expect them to draw something at some point,
True.
but you're hoping it's not this turn.
Wow.
These
We're seeing a comeback. Wow, impressive. No Delafil out of 17 cards. And I guess the player that played the Bejeweled Priestess first got ahead. They're 4 cards ahead of their opponents, and totally worth it.
This was a funny game. We had the Tenko Shrine just not get their Delafil the whole game, and then we had the Summit Haven not actually have their summits and being the one reactive with their Heavenly Knights throughout the game.
It turns out when your win cons are not drawn and the game becomes a slugfest, the player that draws the win con first is a bit ahead. So is there any way for you to come back? Because I see 17 damage from the hand.
I mean, your hand just doesn't do anything. You have 2 Jeweled Priestesses, which are... You're never going to get those cards off of them.
That either also represents 3 damage, so I believe that's going to be game. Yeah, that is game, because the most... They have 7 on board. Like, they can't go lower than 7.
And even opting to not trade it just to get the Jeweled Priestess onto the board.
That's game. What a funny game. I've never seen a game like that.
It's very interesting the way that whole game played out. I'm more impressed that throughout that whole game we never saw a Father Punishment.
Actually impressed that Team Disastra kept their cool. Like, remember they lost 2 50-50s. They felt really far behind. They were looking at an opponent with 2 Tenko Shrines on the board. But as I mentioned before, maybe they thought the same thing. They had the same thought process as I did. Wait a minute, guys. They didn't play Delafil on 6. They don't have Delafil. What if they don't draw Delafil? Maybe we can outlast them. And they were right. I mean, Team Raindrop played a lot of threats, which means the top of their deck is going to give them Snow Whites and Lorenas. They didn't have that before. So, very well played for both teams. And they made lemonade out of the lemons that they received, and one came out ahead.
And now they're going to be going into this... They have 2 games on their Puppet Portal. They got to be feeling pretty comfortable now. Puppet Portal is one of those decks that you can usually feel pretty comfortable that you're going to get a win with it.
On the other hand, I think those 2 archetypes are possibly the strongest to attack that deck. Runecraft doesn't allow them to get the Silva procs. It also is has very 1-for-1 removal, which is something Puppet struggles with. Puppet can't establish very wide boards. They usually play a follower a turn, and really likes to deal with that. As for the Tenko, again, it's another one of those decks that the banish effect is actually quite relevant for the Puppet deck. If they banish their cards, they don't have access to puppets. They can struggle.
Black Inscripture lines up really well against things like Automaton Knight, Flower Doll, and even Nicholas just being a 4/3.
Yep.
Vesalius as well.
So they chose to start with a rune. They're more comfortable with this deck. And in this matchup, Silva can be very important, very strong. The problem, though, is that, again, they can deny the procs, or they can go for a Flame Destroyer play to deny the ambush Silva.
Yeah, Flame Destroyer coming down the turn you're planning on playing your Silva is a very strong way to just stop them from being able to do that.
Yeah, forcing them to Lococo where they want to play the ambush is a very situation to be in.
This is an interesting hand. You have your double Fire Embraces, which is nice. You get to charge them up early, but you're not spell boosting anything else, and the rest of your hand is not too valuable.
I think the most concerning part is that there's no concentration. Concentration is a very important card in this matchup, especially going first. You need a hand size. You need something to cards, either Fate Sand, concentration. Turn 3 is where your opponent is going to play a Flower Doll or a Hamelin, something very weak, you can take that 2 damage and then clean it up the next turn. But you definitely need to keep that hand size big. If you don't draw your Chimeras or your Roonies, you literally have no way to win the game.
Yeah, right now their hand is just removal with a little bit of cycle with that magic missile. They're definitely looking to pick up something a little bit heavier. And they still need to find something like their giant chimera somewhat soon too.
Yeah, I've had a couple of games yesterday at the Monkey of the Week tournament where my Chimeras were at the bottom of the deck, and even though I managed to kill every threat of the Portal deck, I just gave him infinite time, and infinite amount of time, usually the deck would storm.
Right, so the chimera is there, and that was actually a Hamelin, which, interesting play. They're walking right into that magic missile. Saving
They
the
didn't
Lococo for
see it the
something-
turn before. They saw an inside, so maybe they predicted it to not exist. But I think it was a bold prediction, or they just thought that copying the Lococo is stronger, and that extra damage is stronger than the Flower Doll.
Lococo is actually a way for them to deal with something like a Flame Destroyer.
So they're setting up for the long game. I expect the Silva to be their turn 7 play, and since they copied the Lococo, they're probably expecting the Flame Destroyers. Oh, look at that! We
Yeah,
got
there's
the
the
card that we
concentration.
needed. Yep. Last couple of turns have been very important for Team Raindrop. They got exactly what they want.
I really like how they're not just snap playing that Raindrop. They're not snap just playing that concentration. They don't want to show weakness that they desperately need to draw cards. They're being patient with it. Is this really what I want to do? Trying to bluff something.
Do we have a Rooney? Do we have maybe Magic Missile? Can we ping face? So it's a very way to not allow your opponents to read you. And on that side, there are players that will try to read your hand from that. So very cool to see.
Yeah, and with 3 players on the other side, you have to imagine somebody's going to be thinking about it.
Let's see. There's 2 options here. You can go for a double 2-drop. You can go for Nicholas. Usually, I like going wide against Rune, but since they have Missile and such a big hand, you have to expect them to have an answer anyways. So might as well go for the Nicholas and get that Robomi as fast as possible.
So here you've only seen 5 spell boosts. What do you think about potentially trying to see if your opponent doesn't have quite what they need and just evolving? Yeah, and that's what they're gonna do. So just this is a bit of a gamble, but saying I'm making my 6/5, I'm making my 4/3 bigger. If you can't deal with this, it's gonna hit you really hard.
Yeah, this to me feels like a desperate move. It feels like their early game didn't go as they wanted it to go, because if my opponent didn't concentrate, I would be very comfortable making that play. But having a Rune opponent concentrate, it is very hard for them to not have a Rooney, to not have an Owl, to not have a Wind Blast, to not
Magic
have...
missile.
Yeah, because you have to bear in mind they have a Missile. They know that information. So Wind Blast, Fire Embrace, Absolute Zero Blade, those are all options that are capable of killing that. Even Conjure Golem, another Mysterian Missile, there's a lot of combinations.
I'm interested that they held on to the Magic Owl. Do you think that's maybe they're holding onto it in case they draw something like a Fate's Hand?
Exactly, I was going to mention that. It is very important to hold that Owl for another Wind Blast, for Flame Destroyers. If you use it now, you cannot spell boost with your top decking. You don't want to use your Embraces, like Spinari. Yes, Spinari is not a bad target, but if they play 2-drop, 3-drop, you don't want to Fire Embrace that. You want to Fire Embrace that Robomi, so you want to save them for later. So again, it's another situation where we still need either Concentration or Fate Send, because getting double Fire Embrace is one of the worst options you could have.
I don't like this Silva. I think you need that Silva to play in ambush mode to try to close out the game, try to get that damage in. Now you're just giving up so much of that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because they chose not to do it on turn 3. I believe they had the option. They chose to go for Puppet instead, and now they're choosing not to go for it. Maybe they expect their opponents to go for a passive turn. They don't want to allow them to go for a Fate Sand, maybe, or to just go for a very, very expensive spell boost turn.
You could
Because
have
usually
gone.
you want to keep the pressure.
The Heartless battle really doesn't feel very good there. only being able to put on a 3-1 or a 1-4. It's not quite the stats you're looking for on turn 5. The 3-1 would have been answered so cleanly by the magic missile, and the 1-4 gets evolved over by the owl so nicely.
But then again, is it better to Heartless Battle on 7 than a Silva? That is the question you have to ask yourself. And they got rewarded for not playing the owl the previous turn, so glad to see that good play being rewarded.
You think we might see Fiery Embrace? There's no real reason to do it.
No way. Yeah, you see a Robomi, so you always expect to have a target for the Fire Embrace. It's not like your opponent can just not play things for your Embraces. And embracing on the same turn that you play a Chimera is very strong, essentially becoming deal 6 damage or 0 mana deal 5 damage. You can kill their big bodies.
It deals all the damage. It's all the toughness that it removes plus 1 damage, which is...
Exactly.
It adds up real quick.
A good play that a Portal player could do is actually set up their Nicholas on turn 8 and possibly block that Chimera damage, give you enough time for that Noah to end the game. Unfortunately for Team Disastra, they were not able to deal enough early game damage.
So Heartless Battle will take care of this Owl. So will the Basilius. The Basilius does cost your Evo, though.
They're choosing to hold into their Evo. I think that their game plan is to go Orcus into Noah and evolve on those 2 turns. Which is interesting to me is, again, that Silva decision is very interesting. As we see, Silva here only dealt 1 damage, right? Let's see how much damage it'll end up doing. I assume it's going to end up doing 3 damage when they play their Noah. So essentially, it's not as much as the ambush one, obviously, but I think they were expecting Flame Destroyers to come.
I want to point out how this puppet room has really done so little. 2 of the puppets they've just had to play out just because they were overdrawing.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that they didn't really have interesting things to do. They didn't have scenarios. They chose not to play the Heartless Battle, and that puppet room ended up getting them 1 puppet, not even getting procs from the Silva, and it's just an unfortunate event that Puppet Room is very strong because you can combine Orcus and Noah for full effectiveness. However, if you don't have anything else to do, Nicholas, they would have loved to play more Nicholas. The more Nicholas you play, the more pressure you put on. But it just didn't end up going that way.
And this Rooney is just going to get a Prophecy of Doom, Boons, rather. Why not get the Prophecy? There's no real reason not to. You could draw cards with your Concentration, or you could draw a whole bunch of cards with Prophecy and Concentration at the same time.
And Silva here would have been extremely powerful. They actually didn't have a way to deal with it, not even a ward to protect themselves. It would have ended up doing 6 damage. Might have been enough.
So I want to point out, this Lococo hasn't actually transformed anything this game. I wonder how much that decision to Hamlin their Lococo on turn 2, how much damage do you think that ended up costing them? They could have potentially played something like their Silva on turn 3 and pushed a whole lot of damage.
Yeah, they would have been able to play the Flower Doll, she would have survived, and then get the Silva. Obviously, we have all the information, but they didn't see a Magic Missile turn 2, so maybe they didn't expect. They expected their Hamling to survive, so they would get the extra damage. It's hard to know, especially in team games. There'll be a lot of mind games. Like, I won't do the optimal play, so I give you the read that I don't have it, so that I punish your attempt to punish me. Like, you definitely see a lot more bluffing, I guess, or some sort of I'm not setting up the best play to catch you off.
There's a lot of they'll take a lot of losses now to try to get a gain later down the line, try to catch you with a trick.
Exactly. And it's definitely something you see more when players get together in discussions of plays. You'll see a lot of weird ideas, and sometimes you just combine those ideas. You're like, wait, this is the best play, we all figure that out, but what if they also think this is the best play? What if we just combine the 2 strategies and maybe that Amlin will push that 1 damage that later on we'll need to end the game.
I wonder how big that giant chimera is.
One of the ways you can count spell boost is actually by counting his shadows.
Mhm.
So we saw an owl die and a he die. So that's 2 shadows, which means it's they played 13 spells. However,
But we
the
did see
Chimera was not in hand when they started the game. Also, the fact that they evolved an owl and the Rooney makes it so they get extra spell boost out of them.
This chimera is probably around 10 damage, maybe.
So I would assume it's 13. I assume it was spell boosted 10 times or 12 times.
Somewhere
and
between 10 to 15 would make the most sense.
And again, oh, definitely 10, 15 because of the shadows. It's less than 15 because of the amount of shadows. But again, they block the Arcus with his Flame Destroyer, and this is why this matchup kind of struggle. Unless you have a very strong Silver opening, it's very hard to deal with Flame Destroyers. You lose a lot of tempo by doing so.
So you have your Paracelsus here, where you also have that substitution. Paracelsus really doesn't feel too good at this stage of the game. You don't want to commit your Evo to it. You want to Evo face. If that's the only way you're actually going to get that damage to close this game out, I think.
What if they went for Orcus? But I think they can set up lethal even if they went for Orcus, so that's why they chose not to. Because definitely, the longer you take to play Orcus and Noah, the longer you take, the harder it will be for you to win the game.
I find that substitution a little interesting. You do get an extra puppet this way, but maybe there's merit to just clearing out both to save a little bit of HP. Do you really need that extra puppet?
I think at this point, the 1 extra damage it's more of the 1 extra damage is very relevant. So they're just looking at it and saying, we need 4 puppets for Orcas and we need 4 puppets for. That's essentially what they're trying to do.
Giant Chimera is going to come just give a quick
16.
little love tap.
So 16, so it was spell boosted 13 times. So we were close. We were close.
And you have Orcus, you have Noah, but it's not really helping you enough here.
That Flame Destroyer, that turn was key. Stopping the Orcus might have been enough if they were able to Orcus, force the Rune player to make a awkward turn to deal with all the 3-2s. So that's why I was thinking, what if just ignore the Flame Destroyer, or you evolve the Orcus to kill the Flame Destroyer and instead went face with the puppets? I wonder if that would be lethal, because that would be a lot of damage.
Yeah, this is a lot of damage happening here. But unfortunately, it's not going to be quite enough. I believe this giant chimera has been spell boosted enough to close this game out.
2, 4, 6, 7. You would need 10. Considering that they draw the chimeras back to back, I expect it to be big enough. I believe this will be like a 15 damage.
Yeah, and it only needs to push 2 damage. The teddy bear would be enough.
Yeah, so that was a 6, 7, 8. That would 16, I believe. 16 damage. Yeah, it's like the old chimera because they were drawn basically at the same time. They were like back to back.
All right, and that is going to be Raindrop taking that game on their rune.
And we saw 2 quick 2-0s, and
well,
for
that's
2 Disastra teams, very impressive.
well, it's not a 2-0 quite yet. Now we're gonna have one more fight
Oh,
here.
you're right. I messed up. The first game, Disastra won. The comeback was real.
Yeah, so we have Portal against this Tenko Shrine Haven. Who do you think is going to be favored here?
I tend to think Tenko Shrine is strong in this matchup, but I'm gonna be curious to see if they will make the crucial plays. So one of the most important plays you can do in this matchup is actually to Moriai on turn 3, making it so that your Tenko is much safer against their Paracelsus or their Nicholas. I'm kind of curious to see if they will try to go for that one. If you can establish a Tenko without taking too much damage, you can fall down to 12, 13, and then stabilize around 15 against the Noah. You can definitely grind them out of resources and win.
there are ways as Portalcraft where you can also just keep your Haven opponent off balance between having Sylvas and just keeping those puppets in your hand so that you can close the game out.
Silva is a key card. Obviously, you need to counteract the Delafil heal. That is a very important. The puppet deck cannot deal 20 damage, so you need to keep your opponent in check and keep them low enough for you to end the game.
These players just making sure that they're going first. In this format, the losing team does decide to choose who goes first here, and it seems like Disastra wants that.
And that is actually something that I found curious. Do you remember the last series? I believe the Aggro Forest went second twice. So I wonder if teams are cool that chose to go second the second game.
I've heard mixed opinions on if Forest is favored going first or second in the mirror. I've heard a lot of arguments going both directions. You get to have your Goblin going first if you choose to go first. You get to have your Goblin, and you get to have that tempo a little bit faster. But if you choose to go second, you have that extra evolve for your Materas, for your Rains. There's a lot of different arguments in both directions.
Absolutely. And you see here, this mulligan is not very comfortable for the Tenko Shrine deck. I mean, you obviously want to keep your Tenko Shrine, but it's very unsafe if you don't have Three Eyes or Blackened Scriptures.
Yeah, you definitely want to have your early game. That's not missing your early game against a deck that's as fast as Puppet Portal, where it can deal so much storm damage from hand, can really hurt you throughout the course of a game.
This is a very hard decision. They actually chose not to keep the Tenko Shrine. What do you think about that?
I think it worked out really nicely for them. They ended up drawing another Tenko Shrine. They got a very good curve here with their 1-drop and their 2-drop. Their 2-drop being Snow White, which is exactly what you want. And even being Snow White against your opponent mulliganing away their substitution, that worked out even better.
Well, they're taking their time. This is the decider match, I believe. This is whoever loses this match is out of the tournament. So they're trying to map out their curve, which is something that a lot of players tend to do on turn 1 because you just have the time. You have 3 people talking to a voice call. Just take your time.
White Fang Temple is exactly what you want to draw to start rounding this hand out.
I actually think Moriai would be stronger than White Fang Temple. As I mentioned before, you definitely want to curve Snow White into Moriai. Look at that.
There it is. There it is. That's everything they needed. Now let's see if they end up playing the Moriai on 2. You said it's very important for them to play on 3.
Yeah. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see this. I was actually talking to Zerofine on the hotel. I showed him my phone. I'm like, I'm supposed to pass here, right? I had a Moriai on 2, and I chose to pass on turn 2. And he told me, no, you go for Moriai. I'm like, watch this. So I go Moriai on 3. On turn 5, I get a clean board to develop my Tenko. And I'm like, how do they win now? I just have a Tenko on the board. And it was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So it's funny to think that passing sometimes is bad, but setting up a stronger future turn, especially when you go second, because you can evolve. You can evolve a Lorena, which is something I did. Kill 2 bodies, recover that lost tempo, and then you just have the Moriai pop.
Yeah, passing on turn 2 when you have a Moriai is a very interesting play, considering that the Moriai does cycle itself. In a way, you could get yourself thinking that it's free to play the Moriai, but
because you can think of it this way. If you evolve Lorena on turn 4, you can deal with 2 bodies. If you play Moriai on 2, the Moriai will kill 1 body, meaning that the Lorena Evo will only deal with 1 body because your opponent doesn't have anything else. So what you can do is you allow them to have 2 bodies, kill them with Lorena, and then the Moriai kills the 3rd body. If you go Moriai on 2nd, you only deal with 2 bodies, and then you play a Tenko when they already have some. It's a small difference, but can mean a lot in terms of using your mana in future turns.
So here the question becomes, do we want to play this Puppet Room, or do we want to fight for the board just a little bit more with this Flower Doll?
It is a difficult choice. I think Puppet Room becomes worse the longer the game goes, but as you mentioned, you need to pressure Tenko. You cannot give them enough time. I think they're going to play the White Fang, and I'm not going to like it. I'm really curious.
playing the White Fang here gets punished if your opponent has a pretty strong turn for next turn. But looking at the hand,
Exactly.
it's just Puppet Room. So here, if they go for the White Fang, I think they might actually get rewarded for it.
Yeah, it's also valid. Again, I mentioned before, I like to go White Fang after I establish Tenko, just to get that 2 extra damage for longer. As we saw one of the games, it was important. The fact that they played White Fang before the Tenkos meant that they had less pings. And what ended up happening was they didn't draw Delafil. They don't have Delafil at the moment. So that might actually happen, that they just don't have enough pings. You obviously don't expect that, but you have to keep that in mind.
I find that trade pretty interesting. Just a way to force out an extra puppet from your opponents.
Keeping them low on puppets is very important. Unfortunately, he gets punished by this puppet room. He'll give him way enough puppets to deal with everything they need.
So, back in the olden days, we would see a Tenko Shrine right here, but nowadays, Tenko Shrine costs 5. Can't quite do that. Might see something like the Moriai plus the Rhina. It's pretty clean.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what we get. And yep, it's a very clean turn. I would expect him to get the healer spell, because combines really well with a second Tenko on turn 6.
Yeah, it's going to give you a pretty strong curve moving forward. And then those Light Hinds are going to be able to start healing up and removing things. Could become quite a headache to deal with for Puppet Portal.
And as we mentioned before, not having the access to the Silva, that it's just going to be extremely hard to keep them below 13 health. As soon as they drop the Tenko, any sort of board control try to get, it's going to be hard to get it.
Okay, so this evolve is to play around Tenko Shrine. But what do you think about evolving something like your 1/1 instead, the Spinario's Artifact? It does walk into a black inscripture a little bit harder, but it does increase your chances of something sticking if your opponent does decide to go for that Tenko Shrine here.
I think that since you're giving +2/+2 to a smaller body, it actually doesn't really matter. You usually care for spreading stats when there's hard removal on your opponent's deck, which is not the case. Haven does not run hard removal unless they go for black Hind, but that's such a risky move when you have a 1/1, right? So I think it is a safe choice to actually spread the stats.
Interesting. So this
because it's not a fact of having something to stick. It's the fact that the body that you stick will be the stronger body, the 4/7 in this case.
Regardless of that Evo, this is a very difficult board to deal with. You almost don't feel comfortable going for that Tenko Shrine here. And
I
play if they go for, and they end up losing the roll there.
Yeah, I would actually probably play the Tenko. Still, I would not feel bad losing 5 health, setting myself to 13, as long as I can, deal with the board next turn. The reason why I don't like this as much is that next turn they're going to go for Tenko and the heal spell, and it just doesn't feel as strong when they can just substitute this, or Basileos, this 5/3, and not only that, you're going to lose the healing from White Fang, and you're not going to be even able to attack with White Fang.
Well, this does set up an evolve with their White Fang next turn, so they can go something like evolve plus safely play their Tenko Shrine. But that is their last evolve if they do go for that.
And I did talk about this a bit before, not having healing effects. If you don't see a Delafil in your hand, just think about it, boys. Just hold for a second, say, what if we don't draw Delafil? Should we play this White Fang on 3, or should we hold it for the extreme value and things out of Tenkos? Because at the moment, I'm only seeing that Hind, and you can't even activate the Hind yet, because you're only going to have 1 amulet.
Do you think we're going to see the Basilius, or do you think they're going to end up deciding to hold on to that Evo and just play out that Heartless Battle? They didn't play the Heartless Battle last turn because they didn't want to walk into that Tenko Shrine. They might end up making that same play here.
I really like in this matchup to go for Lloyd on turn 7. It's a very hard minion to remove, although there's no Silva. There's a Silva effect online. Lloyd, it becomes a lot more threatening. So I expect him to go for that option.
Yeah, so I think this is setting up pretty nicely. They do have that Evo on that dragon now. And they can set up that Tenko Shrine just for free. They finally have the time to play it.
Would you go for the healing? Or would you just pass? I might keep that healing spell for Tenkos.
I don't see a reason to heal. If you're going to be evolving anyway, the heal is just going to push 2 damage. I think the other consideration would be, do you want to play the Summit Temple or do you want to hold on to that? And with that big dragon on the field, I don't think I want to play that Summit Temple.
Another option is to heal the dragon. That would be kind of like a cool play because it plays around the substitution.
That is interesting. That's something to consider. But we do know that there isn't that substitution here. But that is what they're going to go for. It also does play around the Heartless Battle too. So there is a good amount of merit to that play.
This forces them to use more puppets for the Heartless Battle, which is obviously something they don't want to be doing. And I don't like to keep saying the same thing, but obviously Silva, we see here the impact of Silva. She would be for the extra damage, extra pings. Your opponent would be a 15. You know, it keeps you at the range where you could kill them. This way, it becomes a lot harder.
When your opponent is healing every single turn, you kind of need that Silva proc to pressure them every turn to keep them at least
to balance it out.
So here, this turn isn't looking very strong. You can go double puppets, trade, and then play Heartless Battle just to keep your battle alive. You can go battle, trade into it with the Victoria, and just have it die.
I like Lloyd or Victoria. I like Lloyd. I definitely like Heartless Battle. Get me as many puppets as I can to play this Orcus, to get a wide board that's possibly difficult for your opponent to deal with. But they're choosing to go for probably a Heartless Battle into a Hamlet, and maybe go for the Victoria, as you mentioned.
Yeah, just remove that big 8/5. This leaves something on the board, so at least at the moment, that Tenko Shrine won't push base damage. Oh, and they're actually going to keep the Victoria alive here.
I'm not a big fan of this play. Your board is very weak to basically anything. Delafield and Delafield is very strong against it. Blackened Scriptures, second Tenko with any healing effect. I guess there's no healing effects anymore, so that it's safe on that regard. But like Hind with any 2-drop amulet, which there's a couple still. There's Globes, there's Moriai's. Like there's a lot of options for them to this board. But I guess leaving the 8/5 dragon, they were afraid of it. They left the Lloyd. If the 1/7 Lloyd wasn't capable of killing the dragon, they felt scared of that at that moment.
Now there's so many ways to just clear this board up here. You can go Tenko Shrine and you can heal yourself with the water, with the holy water. You can get De La Phil started now, and you can also heal yourself with the water. Or you can just De La Phil and just leave it as is.
They already played the holy water. They don't have access to it anymore.
Oh yeah.
Played it the turn before, but I do like this Delafield. Unfortunately, didn't get the 50-50, so maybe Hind a bit stronger play, but getting that Delafield stack is also very valuable.
Hind would have left them with a smaller body on board, but it would have cleared off both the things there.
Yeah, I don't know if because this is very susceptible to the Victoria, and now they can go for the Orcus, right? Orcus is at the moment represents a lot of stats, but it walks right into that Temesburge.
Yeah, you can't feel too comfortable playing that Orcus quite yet. But maybe that is what they're going to do. Maybe we'll even see Lococo on there.
You know what would be a fascinating play? Would be to go Basilius and Paracelsus. That's a lot of health. Might force a Temesburge.
Yeah, it's a very slow play, but it gets the most stats and the most damage for next turn.
It's probably what they're debating. They're probably debating that. I could guess their voice chat. I would love to have that. We should try in future tournaments to get the feedback out of the voice chat. So at the end of the game, we could listen to the key moments of every turn. That would be kind of cool feature to have.
Interesting. Another thing they could have done there was they could have gone trade 2 puppets, play out Orcus, trade with Victoria to keep Victoria alive, and then you keep yourself with the Victoria and a 5/5 Orcus. That doesn't push as much damage.
Yeah, I think they were looking at we have to set up 2-turn lethal. We're gonna go with the Orcus, hopefully get a Noah later on, or another Orcus, possibly, the third Orcus. They definitely want to get a Noah or an Orcus at this moment, because they're probably gonna be facing a Themis Purge, I assume, and
There it
then
is.
they will have to go for Orcus for the 3 puppets, perhaps, or just the Basileus Paracelsus.
All right, and there's the Orcus. That the Noah rather. That is what you're looking for, but that's still not quite enough damage.
Not only that, there's a lot of ways for your opponent to just ward, right? There's 2 Delafils, 3 Heavenly Knights that you've not seen yet. There's a couple of more healing effects, White Fang temples, and it's gonna be tough. Alexiel is also a tech card that they are choosing to play, even though it's not as effective in this matchup. Still a ward.
Yeah, anything that just has ways to block damage is going to just give the Puppet Portal a very hard time to just figure out how they're actually going to get that damage through.
Even the 7 Knight, like, it's extremely hard. They have the Lococo, but that's almost their entire turn. I bet they were wishing they had a Nicholas here. Nicholas here would have felt really strong, would force maybe another Themis Purge, or just I don't know, would help deal with the Heavenly Knight, kinda. You usually want to Lococo when you already have a board established, so you can push all that tempo.
We might just see the Orcus here just to get those puppets started. But that is not what's happening. Instead, we're just going to have that Basileus come down with the Paracelsus.
It's interesting. I was actually thinking you'd probably want to go the other way around. Instead of exposing your Orcus to the Themis Purge, you do these 2 instead to force the Themis Purge. But maybe they thought it wouldn't be enough to force the Themis Purge, because the 5/6 isn't very threatening when there's still Hinds and Heavenly Knights.
There also are only 2 Themis Purges in the deck, so maybe they were just taking a gamble saying, hey, what if they don't have it? Maybe that's a route for us to win this game.
Maybe it's the only route we have to win this game.
So what do you think here? I don't think you have a way to clear off everything. Unless you expose a Hind. If you play a Hind, maybe you can.
Yeah, I think Hind is a good option. You can go Hind Summit Temple. It's very strong, deals a lot with their board. You know they have no puppets, so the most board they can establish is either a 5/5 Nicholas, a 5/5 and
You can go Hind plus Tenko Shrine here.
you don't have enough play points.
Oh, yep, you're 1 play point off, you're right.
Unfortunately. Which means they might actually go... I wouldn't blame them if they went Summit Temple Heavenly Knight and kill that Basileus. Delafil would heal your Heavenly Knight. They would probably... Oh, interesting.
And they're keeping the temple hidden. I guess they just want the board space.
That's quite interesting.
They still have that Jeweled Priestess in their hand. Maybe they're thinking, hey, if we're ever going to want to draw those cards off the Priestess, we're going to need the board space.
But it's just that the Blackened Scripture works so well against Nicholas, right? It's interesting. Oh, but they got the second one, so it still works. Now they can go for the Hind play if they want.
Hind plus Tenko Shrine won't actually clear off the Orcus here, I don't think.
Oh, it does, because now you have 2 Tenko Shrines pinging. So that would mean that each healing effect would do 4 damage.
Oh yeah, you do have that Delafil up still. This is fine too. Just set up all the Tenko Shrines. Who cares?
Actually, I'm not a big fan of 3 Tenko Shrines, because they usually stack on the same target, and they're not very effective in my opinion. But again, you're so far ahead, I guess they could have the luxury of just going triple Tenko Shrine. I just like the flexibility. If followers are flexible than amulets, I usually don't like to play 3 amulets. It's kind of like the same when Ilana was the popular deck. You usually never play Ilana because it's actually backfiring. You don't play followers together with Tenko Shrine.
That's what you're saying, but this, you can Blacken Scripture here and just let all the Tenko Shrines just take out this 2/5 at the end of the turn for basically for free. You could even take some time and set up that Jeweled Priestess here. Probably the only time they'll have a chance to draw some cards off of it.
Yeah, it'll probably still lead them to a win, but it's just a faster way to win, I believe.
This I find interesting. This is just going to push quite a bit of face damage. Set him to 1 HP here.
They're getting it a little bit desperate. It might be risky. Yeah.
Well, they can fall back on Jeweled Priestess plus the Black Diamond. That will take a couple turns though for that actually to go off. What do you do if you're the portal here? Your options aren't the best. If you play Silva, it just dies.
You also die. Hein kills you.
Oh, yep. That also doesn't help.
So you have to trade with a Noah, which is something you don't want to do.
No, when your opponent's at 18 HP, the way you're thinking you can actually win the game is maybe just stacking Noahs, but that option just looks like it's so far away here.
I think you hold the puppets. Your opponent played all the Blackened Scriptures. There's no way to deal 3 damage to this. It's only John. But then again, if you play puppets, you still die to John. So you still lose to John. There's no reason to play around it.
Is this the Black Diamond here? Set him on that clock right now.
I think so. Your Tenko Shrines just kill their board, right? How are they going to kill you? They need exactly 3 Noahs, and you're putting them on a clock makes it so that they have less time for the Noahs. Going for the White Diamond to look for a win con, might as well just play the Black Diamond. It's a win con by itself.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense to play a White Diamond. There's no healing other than Orcus to be afraid of.
It also doesn't make sense to play Globe, because no Amulet is going to win you the game flat out, right?
No, an Amulet will be way too slow.
The best one would be White Fang, but that doesn't really do anything, because they'll just stack. The Tenkos just do like 12 damage to the Noah.
Would an Orcus off the top there would that have been able to swing things?
Possibly Lloyd Orcus, because it's a lot of Elf.
Yeah, it'll gain you some HP, get you out of Black Diamond range. And then your opponents, they only have that Tenko Shrine. They're doing 6 damage a turn every turn. That's really hard to get past, but they're really not able to develop too much of any other value after that.
It's possible. Definitely possible. This is also possible to be strong. Interesting. They chose not to Silva this turn. Instead, they're going to go for the puppets now.
Not too crazy about this trade here.
I think I would have liked to go for this.
Nah, Silva actually, they'd be dead otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess I like the trade a little bit more than I said a moment ago.
So there's need a Noah. I believe Noah would be 8. Nah, Noah is still not lethal. Wow.
There's been a lot of healing throughout this game.
Because Noah is 9 damage.
For how many turns has Dalefill's been active? For at least 5-6 turns.
And you see here the importance of that Silva on turn 3, the acceleration out of it. We're like turn 12 or 13. This game, she would be like 7 or 8 extra damage. Look at the difference it would make.
Yeah, we might have been able to just see lethal with a Noah a couple turns ago if there was a Silva that came down a little bit earlier this game.
This is so clunky. This is another reason. Like, triple Tenko is all great, but sometimes, man, it's just so awkward.
The 6-1 lived. That's the one you're going for, but
no own Orcus.
Yeah,
that would be game.
Not quite enough. You can clear the board, but no matter what, that diamond's just gonna get you. There's nothing you can do about it here.
Diamond's so beautiful, yet holds a curse. The black curse of death and doom.
That is exactly what it's going to be here for Team Disastra.
Germany shall prevail, Zero. I tell you. I believe.
They got really far last time. They got really far today. They've proven that they're a very, very strong team when it comes to the team format.
Yeah, there's a lot of cohesion and like team building spirit, and they've been working for a really long time. I know Imari and Sheepy are in real life friends. They're personal friends, so definitely a lot of team chemistry. And Sheepy and Essia are like not only they are the oldest members of the community in terms of competitive game, but they're also known each other for that long.
And that's going to be the win for Team Raindrop, taking them right into the final.